My main desire since I was a child has been to create my own happy family and one day be a parent. I understand that for some people this may sound trite or even old-fashioned, but it was something profoundly ingrained in my heart. Growing up, I was lucky to be nurtured by two amazing parents who shared a bond that I can only describe as very exceptional. My parents' relationship was a beacon of love and stability, which I admired and tried to replicate. They met in high school, and everyone knew they were meant to be together right away. As a child, I noted that they always treated one another with tremendous respect and kindness. Whatever the situation, they weren't just married. They were best friends with a relationship that was visible in everything they did. Seeing this day after day made me want it for myself. And I didn't want to just marry anyone one day. I wanted to find my own best friend, someone with whom I could share a life of love, laughter, and mutual respect, above all else. Because of my deep desire to have a meaningful, long-term connection, I aspire to be a father and to raise children in the same loving environment as I did. I was always cautious and discriminating when it comes to dating. I was not the type of person who would enter into casual relationships for the sake of it. I knew what I wanted, and I was determined to meet someone who shared my beliefs and ambitions for the future. In high school, I had a girlfriend who I genuinely believed may be the one. I poured my heart into the friendship. I did everything I could to make it work. Unfortunately, the relationship did not work out. I suppose that people can evolve in unexpected directions, which is exactly what occurred to us. We simply grew apart, and we had to admit that we were not meant to be together. When I went to college, I didn't expect to meet anyone special. I'd resolved to concentrate on my academics and personal development, believing that if the perfect person came along, it would happen spontaneously. I wasn't in a rush, and I wasn't actively looking for a relationship. But, as life frequently does, Bonnie unexpectedly entered my life. Bonnie was unlike anyone I'd met before. She's the type of girl who commands everyone's attention the instant she enters a room. She always had a magnetic quality to her. She had an enormous amount of energy. She was free-spirited and full of energy, and her delight was contagious. It wasn't only her appearance, however. She was undeniably stunning. It was her personality that truly set her apart. She had a way of making everyone around her feel alive, and they couldn't help but gravitate toward her. I never expected anything to happen between us because we were so different. Bonnie looked out our reach, like if she belonged in another universe. I was fine just being her friend, enjoying our time together as a bunch of friends without expecting anything more. But then, after several months of simply being friends, Bonnie called me one afternoon and admitted that she had a crush on me and wanted to go out on a date. I'll admit it took me a while to understand what she was saying, because it was so different from what I had envisioned. Bonnie, the girl who could have had whomever she desired, had affections for someone like me. It was an event that forever altered the trajectory of my life. Of course, our first date went quite well, and I remember being on cloud 9 afterward. We went on more and more dates until Bonnie became my girlfriend. In the beginning, as with most new relationships, I saw Bonnie through rose-colored glasses, believing that everything she did was flawless. I was so enamored with her that I didn't notice any problems, or if I did, I dismissed them as minor. But as time passed and we grew to know one another more, I saw a few things that made me hesitate. What some could call red flags. They weren't necessarily deal breakers, but they made me uncomfortable and made me reconsider some parts of our relationship. One of the first things I observed was Bonnie's inclination to dismiss anyone who disagreed with her, regardless of whether they were correct or not. She was quite confident in her ideas, which was not necessarily a negative thing, but she pushed it too far. Bonnie would become defensive if someone presented a different point of view. Instead of engaging in a constructive dialogue, she would begin calling them out, frequently describing them as foolish or ignorant. This feature made social interactions with her difficult at times. I remember so many of my friends being uncomfortable with Bonnie's behavior toward them. Her mood swings became more noticeable as well. Bonnie's moods could vary in the blink of an eye, and they were usually intense. There were days when she was full of energy and ready to take on the world. She'd ask me to skip lessons and join her for a party. We sometimes hung together with folks we hardly knew, and during these parties, she would do things that were quite absurd. Things made me feel uneasy. However, her mood would suddenly change. She would become withdrawn and distant, and she would want me to take her home. She would then lock herself in her room for several days without explanation. These emotional ups and downs were difficult for me to manage. Bonnie's temper was another issue that became more noticeable as time passed. She could swing from calm to enraged in a couple of seconds. When she became enraged, it was intense. Her rage would quickly rise and she would occasionally lash out physically. I remember her punching her fist into a wall or kicking a trash can in frustration. On several times, she came dangerously near to injuring someone. These eruptions were scary, and they revealed a side of Bonnie that I had not previously seen. As much as I care about Bonnie, these warning signals became increasingly difficult to ignore as our relationship progressed. I was split between the girl I had fallen for and the reality of who she was presenting herself to be. An incident in a movie theater prompted me to confront Bonnie about everything wrong with our relationship. My guy friends had invited Bonnie and me to watch a movie with them and their lady. I thought it would be a wonderful double date, so I asked Bonnie to join us. To my astonishment, she flatly refused, claiming she didn't like my friend's girlfriend. When I pressed her for a reason, she could only tell me that she didn't like the female. This was not unusual for Bonnie. She frequently got into fights with people for no apparent reason, and she never truly defined her dislikes, that I didn't take her refusal that seriously. I informed her that I was going to watch the movie anyhow, and that she was free to join. Suppose she changed her mind. What occurred next completely surprised me. Imagine my astonishment when Bonnie entered the theater during the movie to look for me. At first, I assumed she had changed her mind and chosen to join us. But then, unexpectedly, she approached me and began yelling at me in front of everyone. She accused me of sleeping with my friend's girlfriend, stating that this was why I insisted on going to the movie with him and his girlfriend, despite her objections. She also stated that I plainly preferred other girls over her, which is why she had come here to face me. I was extremely surprised. Her shout was so loud and violent that the entire audience turned to stare at us. My guy friend and his girlfriend were naturally surprised and angry. They attempted to protect themselves and me, but Bonnie would have none of it. She yelled at them to get out of it, claiming that this was between her and me. The situation gradually worsened, and I could feel everyone in the theater watching us. It was quite embarrassing. I had no idea what to do, so I stood up and walked out of the theater, leaving the movie incomplete. Bonnie followed me all the way to my car, ranting at me, calling me a cheater, and refusing to let go. I hadn't said anything before that. I had allowed her to rant, expecting she would finally settle down. Then I could explain myself. But as I saw her continue to shout at me, something inside of me broke. I'd hit my limit. I turned to her and for the first time yelled back. I told her I was done with her, that she had crossed the line this time, and that I did not want to be with someone who treated me like this. I recall telling her, with all of my rage and hurt from the previous months, that I couldn't be with an abuser like her. The words came out more forcefully than I intended, but they were true. I realized Bonnie had been emotionally abusive throughout our relationship, and I had disregarded the warning flags for far too long. Her scream at the theater was the last straw. When I realized I couldn't continue to make excuses for her actions, I knew I deserved better. I went on to express how ashamed and wounded I felt by her accusation. I couldn't believe she would suspect, let alone publicly accuse me of something so heinous. Sleeping with my own friend's girlfriend. It felt like a betrayal of trust, and I made it clear to her that she had no right to enter that theater and accuse me in public without first speaking with me. As I talked, I noticed the knowledge dawn on her face. Bonnie's eyes widened, and I watched her begin to backtrack, trying to retract what she had said. Her voice softened, and she began to apologize, but the harm was already done. I shook my head, feeling both disappointed and frustrated. I told her to get out of the car. I did not want to drive her home. I wanted some space to clear my mind and detach myself from the chaos that had just occurred. But as soon as I said those words, Bonnie broke down entirely. She erupted into tears, rocking her entire body with the force of her sobbing. My indignation waned for a brief moment. I couldn't help but feel sorrow for her as she fell apart. This was someone I loved greatly about, and seeing her in such agony provoked a desire to console her while she grieved. Bonnie repeatedly apologized, stating she didn't want to lose me. She began talking about how her brain can become disorganized at times, and how she does not always know how to manage her thoughts or feelings. Her voice was desperate, and it was evident she was afraid of losing me. Confused by what she was saying, I urged her to explain what she meant, but instead of providing a clear explanation, Bonnie continued reiterating that if she told me the truth, I would abandon her. She mentioned how she felt compelled to keep her other personality secret, which made me even more puzzled. I wasn't sure what to think of it, but I knew we couldn't keep going in circles. I told her she had no other alternative. She told me the truth and let me decide whether I wanted to stay with her, or she walked out of my car and we'd finish things right there. It was a harsh ultimatum, but I needed to know what was actually going on. Bonnie, still weeping, finally confessed something that surprised me. She informed me that she had bipolar disorder, which her mother also suffered from. She had allegedly been keeping this information from everyone since she was ashamed of it and wished she could just be normal. Hearing this, I was taken aback. I didn't expect her to have BPD, but at that point, so much of her behavior began to make sense. The dramatic mood swings, tantrums, and unpredictability seemed to fit with what I knew about bipolar disorder. Bonnie went on to say that when she stopped taking her medicine, her head fogged up, and she began acting strangely. She claimed it wasn't who she truly was, and she despised the way her disorder made her act. I questioned why she would quit taking her medications if she knew they made her worse. Bonnie informed me, with tears flowing down her cheeks, that she simply wanted to live her life like everyone else, and she despised the fact that she couldn't. She would get bored of being sick, of the side effects, and of being constantly reminded that she needed medication to function. Her comments were loaded with grief and despair, and as I looked into her eyes, I could tell she was struggling. It hurt my heart to see her in this state, to realize how much she had been silently battling. At the time, I felt a range of feelings, including pity, sadness, and a strong sense of struggle. On the one hand, I realized that her behavior was not fully under her control, but was part of a wider conflict. She was dealing. However, I couldn't ignore how her actions had affected me and how difficult it had been. I am on the receiving end of her rants and unstable conduct. Although I was still young, I knew that loving someone with a mental health illness such as bipolar disorder took a great deal of compassion, patience, and commitment, and I wasn't sure if I was prepared for it. However, I realized that I loved Bonnie and couldn't just walk away without trying to make things work, no matter what. There was a strong connection here, and I didn't want to toss it away without giving her and us the opportunity to develop. So we got down and had an honest conversation about what needed to change for our relationship to survive. I informed her that the only way we could move forward was if she agreed to consult a bipolar disorder specialist who could teach her how to better manage her emotions and conduct. I also underlined the importance of taking her medication on a constant basis without any lapses. The conversation was not easy. It was heartfelt and raw. Bonnie could tell I was serious and she was afraid of losing me. But to her credit, she understood where I was coming from and offered to do whatever it took to make things better for us. I made it obvious that this was her final chance. Bonnie kept her word for several months. She started attending a therapist who helped her understand the nuances of living with bipolar disease. She also made a point of taking her medication on a regular basis, understanding how important it was for her health and our relationship. It was not a smooth or simple journey by any stretch. There were still difficult days for us, but Bonnie gradually began to learn how to better manage her emotions and be kinder to herself. As Bonnie progressed through therapy and began to stabilize emotionally, our relationship improved substantially. She had always kept certain things hidden from me, but lately she has begun to open up. The more she opened up, the closer we got, and our relationship grew stronger and more profound. When we graduated from college, it seemed like the natural next step for Bonnie and me to move in together. We were devoted to one another and knew what we wanted for our future. We each had excellent careers and managed to live a balanced life together. We were careful in saving and investing our money, with the objective of someday purchasing our own home and marrying. It seemed like life was on track. We were creating something strong and significant together. Then, Bonnie found she was pregnant. This news struck me by surprise. I hadn't given much attention to becoming a father before, but after some time to comprehend the news, I found myself comfortable with it. We were both making good money, and I was confident that we could afford to have a baby. More than that, I began to embrace the prospect of establishing a family with Bonnie. It seemed like another step forward on our path together. But Bonnie felt differently. She was profoundly conflicted about the pregnancy. She even broke down in front of me, admitting that she wished to end the pregnancy. As much as I was thrilled with the prospect of having a child, I believed that she would finally determine what to do with her body. Obviously, I was upset. I had already begun to see our future with a baby, but I knew I had to support Bonnie no matter how much it hurt. I informed her that I would support her decision, whatever it was. We arranged an appointment at a clinic for the surgery, and I tried to be as supportive as possible despite my own pain. However, Bonnie opted not to attend the appointment at the last minute. She felt overwhelmed with remorse and bewilderment. She told me that she thought getting rid of the baby was too much to bear. I tried my best to console her, holding her while she cried and promising her that if she wanted to have the baby, I would do all in my ability to be the greatest father I could. I pledged to be an equal partner in parenting, to share the responsibilities and make sure she didn't feel overwhelmed by them. Finally, she consented to proceed with the pregnancy. Bonnie's pregnancy path was anything but simple. She was overcome with fear and anxiety, constantly concerned about losing our baby due to her BPD. This is why she stopped taking her meds, believing they could harm the baby. As a result, her mood swings got increasingly severe during her pregnancy. Her temper flared up regularly, and she was generally unpleasant to live with during that period. There were times when it felt like we were back at square one, dealing with the same issues we had before she began therapy. But I had promised her that I would never leave, and I was determined to keep my word, no matter how tough things become. Bonnie told me about her frequent nightmares in the first several months of her pregnancy. She was worried that I would abandon her to raise our child alone, especially since we were not legally bound by marriage. Hearing this crushed my heart because it was the furthest thing from the truth in calming her anxieties. I immediately went out to get a ring. I proposed to Bonnie that very week, informing her that I was all in and would be staying. Our wedding occurred shortly after that, but it was a lovely, modest ceremony. Both sides of our family were present and excited for us. I was in the delivery room with Bonnie when our daughter Mary was born. I couldn't stop crying when the nurse brought Mary to me right after she was born. When I gazed at her little fingers and exquisite little legs, I realized how precious she was. Mary's arrival gave me a new sense of purpose in life. It wasn't just Bonnie and I anymore. It was about our small family. I was fully dedicated to make it work. However, once we got Mary home, I observed a change in Bonnie that I couldn't ignore. She appeared aloof and separated from our daughter. She did not want to contact the infant and would only hold Mary when absolutely necessary, such as while breastfeeding. Even then, it was evident she was acting out of necessity rather than affection. I tried to be understanding. I was aware that labor and the early stages of parenting may be daunting. I wanted to give Bonnie space to relax and recover, so I took on as many home tasks as I could. I cooked her favorite meals, urged her to sleep, and made sure she didn't have to do any housework. I was delighted to care for our kid, but it was impossible to overlook Bonnie's increasing displeasure and coldness. When Mary wept, Bonnie would glare at her with a resentful expression. I began to fear that she was suffering from postpartum depression, a disease I had heard of but didn't fully understand. I gently suggested that she talk to a therapist about her feelings, thinking that professional aid would make a difference. But Bonnie would snap at me, instructing me to mind my own business and ending any more discussion on the subject. Then one morning, approximately a month after Mary was born, I awoke to find Bonnie gone. Her side of the bed was vacant. She was nowhere to be seen within the house. At first, I tried not to panic, thinking she might have gone outside to clear her mind or get a coffee. But as the hours passed and her phone stayed turned off, my concern increased. I contacted her parents and friends, hoping she had opted to visit one of them, but no one had seen or heard from her. A terrible sensation settled in my gut. Something was extremely wrong. Desperate for answers, I scoured our bedroom for any clues as to where she had gone. As I rummaged through her drawer, I discovered a diary tucked away in the corner. I hesitated because I knew reading the diary would be a violation of her privacy, but curiosity got the better of me. Flipping over the papers, I learned Bonnie had been discreetly writing about her everyday troubles, rage, and terror. I assumed this was what her therapist had urged her to do. But just as I was ready to close and return the book, my gaze was drawn to a page that froze me in my tracks. They're written in Bonnie's handwriting and contain the words, "I wish I could kill Mary." I froze, unable to comprehend what I had just read. My hands shook as I reread the sentence, hoping I had misread something. But deep down, I understood what those words meant. My wife was clearly hurting far more than she had said, and she had come to see her innocent kid as a threat, or worse, something she needed to get rid of. I felt fear, despair, and a strong feeling of urgency. I called the police and reported Bonnie missing, explaining the situation and the startling diary entry. Then I alerted our families to what was going on. Her parents were obviously distressed and concerned for their daughter. The police eventually found Bonnie at a motel. She acknowledged that she had fled home to keep herself from injuring Mary. Her parents took her in and sought quick professional care for her mental health concerns. Bonnie told them over the course of several weeks that she wanted a divorce from me because she couldn't bear being married or living with the baby. This news left me heartbroken. I attempted to communicate with her, hoping to grasp her point of view and find a solution to our problems. But Bonnie had already made her decision. Her parents also backed her decision. So in the end, I went ahead with the divorce and took full custody of our daughter. This occurred 5 years ago, and since then, I've been raising my daughter Mary as a single father, and we've come a long way. I've never mentioned Bonnie to my daughter because I believe she's too young to understand, and fortunately, Mary hasn't asked many questions about her mother yet. However, I'm on Reddit today because Bonnie contacted me unexpectedly earlier this week. Since the divorce, my ex-wife had made no attempt to contact me, and I had always respected her privacy. I had in fact changed my phone number and relocated to a new location to start over with Mary. Given all of this, I was surprised to get her call. To sum up, Bonnie stated that she is in a much better place in her life and is ready to meet Mary. I was taken aback by her words and reminded her that she had left us, so she couldn't just walk back into our lives. I told her unequivocally that I didn't want to bring any more drama into my daughter's life. I wanted to keep her safe from potential instability. As a result, I decided not to let her meet my daughter until she was old enough to make her own decision. Bonnie, on the other hand, argued that this was unfair and that I should give her another chance. I reminded her how she never gave us a chance and left me with a 1-month-old baby to care for on my own. Bonnie then pressed me, claiming that she was dating someone new who had recently discovered she had a daughter. She implied that failing to make an effort to reconnect with us would reflect poorly on her. Bonnie suggested that we meet at least once to discuss the future and see where things go from there. I was furious when I heard this, and told her that I didn't care what her boyfriend thought of her, and that my daughter and I were not her toys to play with. Despite her repeated pleas, I stood firm and asked her not to contact me again. Since then, I've felt a little guilty about not allowing Bonnie back into our lives. Update 1. Thank you all for your responses. I'm glad the majority of you agree that I shouldn't let my ex-wife near my daughter. I definitely made the right decision. I also intend to find out who shared my phone number with Bonnie, as this was a breach of trust. Update 2. I discovered that my own mother had secretly shared my phone number with Bonnie. When I asked her about it, she immediately admitted that she had stayed in touch with Bonnie over the years. She explained that she had always felt sorry for her and believed Bonnie and I were engaged, which is why she had shared my phone number, hoping it would lead to a reconciliation between Bonnie and me. I was furious when I heard this. I told my mother how delusional her thinking was. I reminded her of the countless nights I had spent alone, struggling to take care of my daughter without any support. I made it clear that Bonnie's BPD and her mood swings had severely impacted our lives. I told her how I had no intention of reintroducing chaos into my daughter's life. My mother did apologize, but I told her that if she ever gave Bonnie any more of our information, I would cut her out of my life and by extension, my daughter's life as well. My father was also upset with my mother and fully supported my decision. Update 3 for everyone asking me and Mary are doing okay. Bonnie tried reaching out a few more times after our last conversation, but I didn't answer her calls or listen to her voicemails. I've since blocked her number, and I'm focusing on continuing our lives as we have been. I'm determined to maintain the stability and peace we've worked so hard to build for Mary and myself.